Welcome back, fellow listeners. It's been a lot of time, and you see me lagging because I have a bad internet connection at home. So this is why I didn't do any more live. But in live, even if I am lagging, I can read. So we have a book left in the middle, chapter 19 of Artifact of Evil, the second book of the Greyhawk Adventure series, and the second book written by Gary Gygax for the Greyhawk setting, the first setting ever created for Dungeons and Dragons. I try to move very little because I know I'm dropping a lot of frames, but that's a problem of this connection. And you have to listen, not to watch me. I don't even know why I maintain my webcam here because you can see me very well now. Anyway, I um, I watch a thing. I want to be sure that we are okay, that you are listening me, and that's all. So I wait a second. Nope. Yeah. Okay. Good. Wait a second. I want to see anything. Okay. Good. You you are listening me. That's the only thing that matters. You see me lagging on the on the webcam, but okay, I need another internet connection, I think. So anyway, the last time is 2, 3 months ago. It's been a long time. I don't remember anything from Artifact of Evil. We are at chapter 19. Uh, I tried to do today chapter 19, 20, maybe 21, but it depends on the length of the chapters itself. Anyway, let's start where we left. Chapter 19. That I remember is we have three party. If I didn't remember it well, the hero party, guard, and the rest. The evil party, Obmi, the dwarf, and his companions, and the also good party, Melf, and the others. I didn't even remember the voices, so I have to redo it from the basis. But anyway, chapter 19. Damn, I forgot water. Wait a second. Good, let's start. Chapter 19. 3 days later, their host returned from whatever business he had been about. The catlord said nothing about his affairs, and the three men who were his guests, they are not making polite inquire. Right, they guard the myth, the catlord is a semi-god. I didn't even remember that, but anyway. They had been well cared for and comfortable. The enforced inactivity galled them, however, and all were itching to be back on the trail of the artifact they sought so desperately. Gallor broached the matter of their return, and the Master Cat said that the matter would be accomplished to their satisfaction in due course. Clear your gear, he told them, and be ready for departure soon. Please be so kind as to see to Gar's things too, for I will speak to him for a bit before you take your leave. Because it's the Master Cat, Catlord, I try to make a cat tone, I think. I am sure. Puzzled, Gar watched Shirt and the one-eyed bard depart for their quarters. What could the Catlord wish to talk him about? Granted, they had met once before, but that matter had been satisfactorily settled to both his and Gord's evident benefit. This matter was of another sort, and only the Master Cat knew, but Gord would soon learn of it, he reflected. Your dogs are playing, Gord, the comment startled the young adventurer from his pondering, but the dark-haired man spoke on, ignoring this. Don't be surprised at such stuff as that. You wonder what I am at, and I'll be blunt and plain. Your mission is known to me, and I approve. No active part will I take, but I will give you some information that may assist you in your coming adventures. You are aware of the second key? Yes, as well as the first and the third, and what they will do if ever joined. The Catlord said somberly. It is now time for me to tell you about that ring you have worn for some years. You asked once, and I spoke not, for it is one that I myself made long ago. There are eight others like it, but that is something altogether different. Are you now aware of any of its benefits? Gord nodded slowly. I think it enabled me to see clearly through intervening clouds, with vision unnaturally sharp and close, but that is all. The humor of the ring includes such vision, and the seeing of light not normal for the human eye as well. Even the sharpest-eyed cat sees not as clearly as you when you employ the power of that ring. That is but a minor benison which it conveys. It has a principal power. It saves your life, but only if you are attuned to it. You are somehow, and this is most surprising to me, it was not meant for humans. Not meant for humans? Gord repeated stupidly, unable to comprehend this. Nevertheless, it worked. That, Gord, is how you managed to twist that banishment spell as you did. The casting will never have affected one so powerful and well shielded as the Reaper when he ventures upon the prime material plane. The ring expanded a portion of its humor and brought you and your friends here. Now there are 8 usages remaining. For all know a cat has 9 lives. At that Guard had to grin. The Catlord was likewise smiling. It will save me 8 more times? That it will, probably. There are always situations in which its humor can be negated. So do not become overconfident, the Catlord warned. That I will remember, said Guard with feeling. Do. The ring has certain other powers you should be aware of, for they do not operate properly without knowledge. Sometimes only with concentration, as with division power. Those who are, or will prove to be, ill-disposed toward you, are seen in sinister light, thus alerting you of their malign nature. Similarly, should you think on it, most devices and traps will be discernible, so you will notice the covering of a concealed pit, some felt trap loaded with poison or blades, or seeing glowing outline magical guards to snare the unwary. They have seen a Regalos stronghold. Had I but known, the prize might have been mine. Guard's voice trailed off as he looked accusingly at the Master Cat. You cheated! Unjustly accused, smiled the Cat Lord contentedly. How could I know what understanding you had of the ring? Besides, never was there an obligation to explain such to you. I do so now, out of my kindness, and a desire to defeat those who will bring ruin to all. God could not but agree with that. True, I do thank you for this intelligence, and for your hospitality during our stay. Please convey my fond farewell to Lady Tailrip and all the others. You are welcome, but not so fast. There is yet a little more. Anxious as you and your companions are, this hiatus will be beneficial, I think, said the Catlord in a serious tone. He poured Guard and himself a pale, greenish wine, handed the young adventurers one of the crystal goblets, and then went on. You are a thief, acrobat, swordsman, and more. Have you ever considered how it is that you are able to have such skills, to gain and improve them so readily? I have. Your performance in the small contests here must have been spectacular, for I have heard repeatedly about it. Lowen, my trusted seneschal, actually thinks you might be dangerous. No matter. The ring you wear conveys sure-footedness, agility, the cat-like property of landing on your feet, and magical ability to climb as a cat does as well. Test this, and you will quickly learn. You must already unconsciously draw upon some of the power of the jam. You say you had this ring created, interjected Gord. You tell me of its great power. Why not also explain the reason for making such rings as this and its 8 mates? The catlord stared at Gord, assessing him carefully. He saw nothing save honest desire for knowledge, and a keen mind trying to discover what lay behind the matter. The Master Cat spoke. Each of the 9 is similar, yet subtly differs from the others. If you are truly attuned to the ring you wear, its humor will enable you to transform yourself into a cat of midnight coat, tomcat, or great leopard as you desire. Fitting, isn't it, for one who styles himself as you do at times? At this Guard chuckled wryly. Yes, I am astounded and pleased at all this. More and more wondrous it grows, but still I am at a loss to understand the reason for the existence of these 9 magic circlets. Each was made as a token and favor for certain humans, let us say. The 9 were bestowed as gifts. Of the other 8 I know, just as I now know the whereabouts and owner of this one. I was surprised to learn how you had acquired it, for I had supposed another manner altogether. You told true when you related to law and the means by which you gained it. There are unanswered questions for us all, it would seem. Now let us join your friends, for it is the hour of leave-taking. The catlord accompanied Gore to the upper floor where Shirt and Geller waited. All was in readiness, so they went immediately to a secluded chamber in the Master Cat's own portion of the ring-shaped villa. The room was filled with strange and bizarre trappings and equipment, but God had no chance to examine any of it. Over there, the catlord said, pointing to a place on the floor. See the 9-pointed star, between the cold sun and silver moon? There is ample room for all of you to stand within its confines. Lord Melf left us by means provided by one who favors him, but I have only this more prosaic device for magical convenience. I have attuned it to the castle of the Archmage Dancer. Do you know him? The 3 adventurers replied in the negative. Altogether started that he had heard of him by reputation. Dancer is a kindred spirit and allied to me. He is aware of your imminent arrival, so there will be no unpleasant surprises when you appear there. Where is the castle of this Dancer located? Asked Geller. Oh, too many pages. In the Cairn Hills, near the shores of Niredale. Dancer will have information for you, I am sure, as he keeps careful track of events of the nature you are concerned with. You should trust him, and do not hesitate to seek his assistance in your quest. He is likely to aid you in some fashion. That is welcome news, Gellert said with relief. It is most likely that we will need to be far to the north of where you send us. If you will but speed us to Chandler or some similar locale, we will be most in its depth. At that the catlord shrugged. Who can say? Dancer is his own man, but he is fair and just and hates the forces of evil. Until we meet again, he said briskly, and rapped the floor with an ebony rod he had gotten from somewhere. There was a rainbow flash, and they were gone. The grey nothingness, without any of the unpleasant sensations that had previously accompanied their transference to the domain of the catlord, washed over them for an instant. Then they were within a sunny round chamber, standing within the outlines of a series of circles and cabalistic diagrams, set into the stone floors in strips of various zones of metal and other substances. The room was unoccupied except for themselves. I smelled the scent of the lake, Gord said as he stepped out of the magical diagram and went to gaze out one of the windows that pierced the circumference of this chamber, one facing each of the cardinal compass points, if the sun was any indication. You refer to the near dive, of course, drawled the one-eyed bard as he and Shirt joined their companion and all of them gazed at the panorama revealed by the window. There are other great bodies of water besides that one, you know. I am provincial, not a world traveler such as you, Galler, Gord said as he inhaled deeply. Of those other so-called lakes, I know nothing. Besides, the smell of the Nile dive is unique, like perfume. More like seaweed and fish, the big barbarian said as he sniffed at the breeze wafting in off the sparkling sheet of blue water, which stretched northward as far as the eye could see. The three men made a circuit of the chamber, peering from each window in turn. They were at the top of the tallest tower of the castle, Tenzer's castle, evidently, although that worthy had not made an appearance yet. The shore of the lake ran gently, northeastward from the place the stronghold was built, and Gord asserted the guess that they were somewhere along the lake's large mid-bay, in territory claimed by neither Greyhawk nor Urst. The cliff-lined shore, rocky verge, and sheer hills of the region made it unpopular with sailors and the barge folk alike. It was a fine place for someone who didn't care for unexpected company. The castle itself seemed to have grown from the rocky spire of an ancient mountain worn to a nub by time and the elements. There were similar towers round about, but this one thrust up in a place where its neighbors were distant. In fact, the prominence stood in a valley, small and ridged, but a valley nonetheless. A creek ran down the southern slope of the ridge at the lower part of the U-shaped vale, passed along the western side of the fortress, and sped in its deep cut channel to fall into the lake beyond. Step-sided cliffs and stream bed made the castle nearly unassailable by usual methods. Guards supposed that there were many protections against magical attack as well. The place rumbled along the natural contours of the rock. Far below was a wall that surrounded the place. Where it was pierced for entry were Barbican drawbridge, gatehouse, and portcullis. Turrets and partisans stuck here and there at the angles were proof against any portion of the machicolated battlements having attackers ascend unmolested. A grassy strip of varying breadth grew between this wall and the rest of the works, although there was a separate bailey from the gate to the place where the rock had been hewn to allow entry into the central spire. Along the paved road were squat stone buildings that formed a parallel set of walls to confine those entering the gate to a narrow way. From the spire rose the roof of a great hall and several lesser constructions, tied by walks and bridges of stone blocks, crenellated and showing pieced merlons for archery. The ancient rock of the mountain had been hardest where the great tower rose. About half of its 70-foot height was of this core, shaped but little by tools, but embrasured between natural buttresses of living stones. A hard place to assault, Galler murmured, and fly wager that there are roofs and shutters of metal to place when this place is besieged. I prefer the open, Shert said in reply, to being bottled up in some little place such as this. Looking at the truth of that, Galler and Gord began searching for some means of egress. The barbarian joined them gladly. They could find neither stair nor trapdoor. They were prisoners, it seemed. Where is this dancer? Said Shert angrily. Major, no? I have word for one who provides no means of living his hospitality. Suddenly the floor in the center of the chamber became as transparent as water. Only a faint reflection revealed that something other than air occupied the space where great slabs of polished gneiss had formerly been seen. Then a strange metallic voice rang out. Welcome to my castle. I just discovered that you were already here, and I regret not greeting you sooner. If you will step onto the transparent sections of floor, you will be with me shortly. Gord took the opportunity to test the powers he had just learned his crucible ring possessed. Neither of his friends seemed eager to comply with the request, eyeing the dear floor suspiciously. Come ahead, the young thief said confidently as he stepped directly into the middle of the glass-like floor. It is as solid as stone. He did not articulate that he had seen no trick or trap in the area when he gazed carefully at it, and tugged hard as the catlord had instructed. Geller strode readily enough to stand beside Guard, even as he spoke about the firmness that his presence demonstrated. Shart was still nervous, and he moved his bulk gingerly, tiptoeing to take a position with the other two. Immediately upon his so doing, the floor yielded to their weight, and they sank only slightly more slowly than they would have in water. "Up he hells!" the barbarian yelled, trying vainly to grab the edge of the floor as he sank past it. Geller and Guard, too, made clutching motions, but some force prevented them from grasping the edge of the solid floor they could clearly see. They sank through the floor of the next level of the tower as well, some sort of laboratory, workroom, and library, from what little they could observe during the brief course of their passage. Again they futilely attempted to hold on. As they sank yet further, however, their rate of descent slowed dramatically, and at the last they floated so softly that their feet barely felt a jolt when they came to rest on a thick rug that was but one of many rich carpets covering the chamber's floors. "Most pleased to make your acquaintance, gentlemen," said a man of medium height and quick gestures. "I am Tenser, of course, and you must be Geller, Shart, and this is Gord." As he spoke each name, he inclined his head courtly and smiled. "Please be seated," he went on, waving toward several chairs and the divan. This room was evidently his personal living quarters. There was a curtained bed, a small dining table, and other objects that showed the room to be a frequently used and well-loved domicile. "Sir Tenser, despite the startling nature of our arrival, we are most happy to be here," Geller said in a stately tone. "It almost seemed we were imprisoned for a time when we were above." "Yes, I understand. However, such construction keeps unwanted snoopers out. And sometimes it keeps other sorts of things in, too, if you get my point." Guard, imagining what sort of creatures magic users often summoned with their spells, agreed heartily that the lack of means to pass freely from floor to floor of the massive tower was a splendid one indeed. Dancer seated himself in an oddly carved chair, with a high wooden back and a padded seat. The thing seemed very old, for the sheen of its wood was blue, the mark of ancient sable wood. The archmage was glad was clad in garments the shade of a robin's egg, with a sash of deep ultramarine and boots to match. Much of the room was also decorated in blue, rugs, armrests, and various and sundry decorative pieces. All shades and admixtures of azure were evident. Small wonder then that Tenser chose to build a skip on the shores of the bright blue lake of unknown depths. The man itself, however, had both brown hair and eyes, Gord noted. He was not remarkable until one observed him closely. Of medium height and build, the archmage seemed ordinary at first. His features were regular, although the nose was distinctive. One look at Tenser's large and penetrating eyes was sufficient to alert the discerning person that this was an exceptional character. His hands were large and long-fingered, and they moved with deceptive rapidity and grace. Gord felt that there was far more to the man than met the eye, and then realized that this was probably done by Tenser on purpose. Unprepossessing and mild, sure ways to put all off guard. No matter now, however, for the archmage was at worst a friendly natural. When Catlord told me of the cause for the great disturbance in the energy flux, I began investigation immediately, Tensar said. There is but little I have managed to glean. Powers contest with each other in the enemy camp. Each masks the action and purpose from the other. The enmity bodes well for all those of a disposition which resists the ascendancy of evil. Still, the struggle might bring woe to us, for the usual user of magic to find something, information, an object, whatever, is now virtually impossible. Geller asked the archmage exactly what he was driving at. Tensor, it seemed, tended toward the pedantic, for he went into a lengthy exposition. All spells draw upon one form of energy or another. Little ones use small energy. Big ones can draw tremendous currents. Those castings that utilize, utilize the power of some deity or another, thus channeled through the medium of a being of power out of one sort, and the aura of such is the instinct. Likewise, work of humor crafting leaves a unique signature, as it were. Oh, not the minor ones. Little spells are much the same as a rune or two written in the sand, but the major works leave a long and identifiable trace, at least for a time. Well and good, Archmage. I understand this, for I am able to work a few minor spells myself. The one-eyed bard reminded Tensor. Just so. Your energy comes from a fixed point as does all. Each focal point is different, distinct and detectable. It is possible for those of great power to clock theirs, however, I cannot. This place is built on a nexus, for I desire to have that advantage. Think on this. Of all probable worlds of this sort, Earth is most magical. There are fewer constraints on humor crafting and other spell working here than on other planes of probability, but that is a two-edged sword, so to speak. Imagine a map which glows with differing patterns and hues. It is a chart of energy points and flux lines on Earth and the nearby planes. It is hard to read, for both knowledge and patience are required. Furthermore, only certain ones with talent or power can even perceive it. When force is employed, the map's color brightens, the lines change, the patterns shift, slide or otherwise, for an instant or longer, as I have already spoken of. Certain ones can observe these changes. Beings are now observing, and interfering too. I can observe, but I am too insignificant to alter patterns, other than my own, of course, by use of energy. Small usage I can mask, but there are those who can hide far more. All the greater patterns and fluxes of Earth are being scrutinized. At the same time, those of beings elsewhere are being screened, altered, concealed. While this indicates still greater events than even those which have recently occurred, it also means I am unable to draw upon any major energy without attracting attention, and possibly retaliation of unwanted, or wanted, or overwhelming sort. Perhaps I will have a part in the resolution of things, perhaps not. And the action now will be premature, so I wait and gather my strength for the appropriate time. This boils down to the fact that I cannot send you to where you wish to go by means of magic. Tensor concluded with a solemnity that was as anticlimactic as his statement. This evoked an immediate response from Gord, who was less interested in the technicalities of magic than Geller was, and not totally uninterested and uncomprehending as Shert was. Where should we be? There is a helix over Shand. That is where we plan to go, said Gord. Perhaps the display is deceiving, the Archmage countered. If so, you must make a choice. Before the wall display became too dangerous and difficult for me to read, I believe I detected a curious flux pattern. Please, please explain this to us, Archmage, the one-eyed bard asked with renewed interest. Perhaps we can discern our course from what you observed. Tensor drew himself up, puffed out his cheeks, and nodded. Who can now? Who can know? Still, perhaps it will mean something to you. For a brief time, a epsilon-shaped pattern seemed to follow. It ran from the Crown Hills area straight toward Shandl. One arm stretched over the Vesve forest and the valley of Highfolk. The second was unstable, but arched toward the eastern shores of Wyestill Lake, vibrating as though the lute string when plucked. It all lasted but briefly, and then the spiraling helix replaced it as powers folk to clock their designs. At this point Tensor rose and left the chamber. The three adventurers began an animated discussion of what their course should be. The southern area was easily assessed and could be discarded as a possibility. They knew what was happening there, and that the elves of Selene and their allies must deal with it as best they could. Certainly, the second key traveled along one of the two arms of the Epsilon-shaped force. But which arm? The one vibrating between Doraka and Molag showed the great tension between the foul youths and the hierarchs. Summoning of their deity indicated the hierarchs thought the thing they sought to be near their southern border, but the flux showed that youths might know otherwise. There was also the questions of relative power. How was it that the Cambion, fell and terrible as Zeus was, could resist such as Nerul? Demonic assistance was the only reasonable conclusion. The left branch of the Epsilon was a less certain clue. There might be interplay with the archmagi of Ifolk, leagued with Mordenkainen and his circle of wizards, with a countering pull again emanating from Doraka. But why? What was transpiring along such a line? The thing Mel sought went northward, from Littleberg with the Bragan leader, Cher recalled. That's right! The stroke toward Shandl, the arm running to the northwest. One trail falls, the other through, Gord cried in enthusiasm. Gellert sobered both young men by pointing out that the pattern might have indicated nothing more than points of power in conflict, a concord of such force, or any number of other things. It then spoke encouragement. Yet, the border area between Furondia and Veluna offers a good route for one seeking the safety of the Vesper, for that wild forest could hide much. It is the only route that one journeying to meet with youths could follow. What with the forces in the south seeking to prevent it, and the horned lords and their master ravening to the east. Finding a dwarf in that forest is as vain as seeking a needle in a haystack, Bart said gloomily. The barbarian brackened. Malfoy recounted how he once did just that. Only the pin was magical, and there were a multitude of haystacks. He said he'd fired the lot and sifted the ash. Burning down the wall of the Vespa is impractical, to say the least, Gallor commented dryly. Is the recounting the tale as merit, I think? Gord said as the barbarian slumped back in his chair at Gellor's remark. If this ob me as the second key, then yous, much as Melf did, must locate dwarf and key and see them to Doraka. The smoke of such burning will leave a distinct trail. No petty escort will be sent to retrieve something so powerful as that piece of artifact. Gord, my young friend, Geller said with a beaming smile, you are sure there are something more than a pair of sharp swords. I begin to think that your mind is keener than that enchanted blade you so prize, for between the two of you have put the point to the vitals. It is to the Vespas forest's shadowy depths we venture. How? The two young adventurers asked in unison. That is easy, interjected Dancer as he strode into the chamber. If you don't fear water dragons. Okay, end of chapter 19. Okay, a brief pause. I sip some water. I look at the what some of notification I get anyway. Okay. Should I have to. Okay. Let's continue. Good. Chapter 20. I don't remember how many chapters it is. I have to look. Wait a second. The reasoning index? I clearly remember an index. Good. 33. Not bad. Whoa. 33. Okay, good. 33. There is a lot of chapters. So, uh, well. And an epilogue. Anyway. Chapter 20. The rush of green water became darker and more threatening as the monsters dived deeper. Huge fish, dwarfed by the bulk of the creatures rising through the depths, darted away in fear. Then a thing only a bit smaller than the monsters swam up, but it was unwilling to cope with the ferocity of the would-be meal, and it sank out of sight almost immediately. The monster arrowed through the water 100 feet beneath the surface. Slowly the light above faded as the sun moved toward the unseen horizon in the west. Hello? Can you turn the page? Good. God could not speak. He, his friends, and the strange slim man rode the back of the great water dragon. Those things that would be harmed by measure were sealed within a metal case as proof against damage. The case and the man were strapped to the scaly back of the monster. It swam so swiftly that even the stout straps would have been sundered were it not for a crystalline shield that sheltered their heads and upper bodies from the force of the water. Dancer had led them below his castle, taking a labyrinthine route that they had eventually emerged in a large cavern filled with water. There lived the water dragon. Unlike the great dragon turtles, these vast creatures had no carapace. It appeared much as would the red dragon, save its wings were vestigial, more like the great flukes of whales, and its feet were webbed. The scales of the water dragon back The scales of the water dragon's back were aquamarine, and its underside the color of old ivory. Where upper and lower scales met, there was a band of deepest sea green color. The monster was beautiful in its way. It was also threatening in aspect. Dancer had explained that the creature was a guardian of his fortress, but it would forego its protection for a time in order for their party to be carried swiftly across the near dive, to a place from where they could travel by other means. None of the men had understood just how swift their passage was to be. The spellbinder had somehow signaled, and the Sunning Man and several servants had come into the cavern and attached the rig to the great dragon's back. It made no objection. Rather, the monster gazed fondly at the Archmage with his fish-like eyes, something that God could but wonder at, for never had he seen expression in the eyes of fish or reptile, or rather, he thought, any expression but cold hatred or ravening anger. Dancer stroked the scale muzzle and fed the dragon fish often, or 12-pound size. They were like minnows to the maw that snapped them up. Never have I seen a water dragon, Gellor exclaimed as he admired the great creatures. They are rare, Dancer admitted. I have seen only two myself, and when this little fellow grows up, he will leave me for the depths of the ocean. So much for that. Then each of the three in turn was introduced to the monster. It hissed softly at each, and it took all of Guard's resolve not to tremble when its turn came. The creature was not showing anger or giving warning. However, when it vented the sound, the water dragon was intelligent and was acknowledging each man as not food. At least that is what Dancer had told them, and there was every reason to believe he spoke the truth. All the while the Archmage crooned and made hissing noises to the monster, and it made odd sounds in reply. Now, my friends, here agrees to convey you swiftly and safely as far as he can, and there you will be met by others who will see that your journey continues. Dancer said at last. Then he gave each of the three an antique diadem of bronze set with aquamarines and covered with sigils. This enables you to survive underwater for a time, long enough for your journey and then some. Do not breathe while you have these headbands on. Instead, merely relax, and the humor of these ancient devices will bring clean air into your bodies and remove the used breath. Return them to my servant when you come to the end of your ride. The end of the journey came soon enough. The great water dragon swam tirelessly for more than a dozen hours to bring them to their journey's end, at least that portion that was of watery element. The dragon brought them suddenly into open air, right at the shore, and, turning its head to gaze at them with huge eyes, it said farewell. The silent man signaled for them to dismount, holding out his hand for the diadems. The three complied quickly. Their gear was handed down by the fellow, and then Water Dragon and the rider were gone. Gilded folk that were neither nixies nor aquatic elves, but something similar, yet altogether different, greeted them. Again this language was silent. Merely signals and gestures, whose meaning could not be misunderstood. The adventurers followed their guides to a place in the underground complex of caves where there was a shimmering pool of water. These odd creatures signaled for the adventurers to step into the pool. "What does this mean?" God asked the bard. Gellor smiled at his two young companions. "I recognize this sort of magic. The pool is attuned to another similar one located elsewhere. In this case, I will suppose the other to be far distant. A Stancer knows where we must go, and these are his associates. Our entry will trigger a tumor that will carry us instantly from this pool to the other. Shall we go?" As the strange underground aquanauts watched with unwinking eyes, the three men stepped into the pool. "All we did was get our feet wetter," God muttered as he peered around the grotto. There seemed to be a few more of the strange folk watching them, and perhaps the glowing lesions that illuminated the cave were now emitting more of their phosphors, but that was all that Tiff could discern. "As I told you, this is a twin of the other, Gord. Unless I am a knave and fool, we are far distant from that place where we were but an eye blink ago." Again they followed the signs of the gilded folk, and in a minute they were walking along a natural passage that rose steeply upward. The three were alone, the gilded folk gone. Puffing from the exhaustion of the climb, tired from lack of sleep, they came into the light and open air in a quarter hour or so. A vast body of water extended before them. The sun was overhead. Sails and buildings could be seen off to the right, a mile or two distant. "Right you were," noticed Shard with a grin. It was obvious they were somewhere else. Now to find where. "A good time to stretch our legs and dry off," said the bard laconically, as he finished strapping on weapons and gear. His companions did likewise, and then the three trooped across a boggy meadow until they came to a road a mile distant. There was commerce here, and Gellor hailed a passing carter plodding his way up the road from the buildings in the distance. "What city is that?" "Ain't no city at all," the ruddily dressed man coldly replied. There's the town of Crockport," he went on, shaking his head at the total ignorance and foolishness of strangers. "Crockport?" God said, trying to remember where that place was located. "Never heard of it," the barbarian said with a shrug. "It's a frontier town of Furiondi," Gellor told them, "located at the southernmost tip of Lake Wyestel. That was some pool, where we are north of Shandel, by 35 leagues and near the eastern edge of the Vesve. It took longer than they expected, but they arrived in the town tired but dry and cheerful. With a good rest and the acquisition of fast horses, they could be trekking into the fastnesses of the Vesve forest tomorrow, still with fair prospects of finding Obmi the dwarf and his prize. This place was too close to enemy territory to begin inquiries for friends or allies, but there were good inns and a thriving market. After a meal and some sleep, the three went about equipping themselves for the expedition. More than horses and provisions were needed. Gellor sought out a place to purchase maps, for they had precious little idea as to the extent and details of what lay within the Vesve. Shard was anxious to find a longbow, and Gord needed muscles for his sling. The bar went off on his errands, while the pair of young adventurers sought a weaponer, hopefully a bowier, elsewhere. There were weapons aplenty to be found in Crockport, and in short order the barbarian found a huge bow that tested even his massive arms. With it and two quivers crammed with broad-headed arrows, each over a yard long, they went on to find Gord's needs. This took a little longer, but eventually they located a place that provided God with a variety of weights and sizes of tapering lead bullets for his sling. With a quantity of these muscles stored away and a pair of well-balanced knives tucked in his boots, the young thief was content. Gellor was waiting for them when they returned. There's scant information to be had, but I have a pair of crude maps, and information from a hunter who was roaming the forest nearby, he said in clipped tones. Let's be off. What's in the leather bag? Shirt asked the bard. Gellor smiled at that. Long as it been since you have heard me sing and play, Shirt, but the luck is cure. There is a fine little harp therein, and I feel far better with such an instrument at hand. With their curses saddled and bearing bedrolls and saddlebags of provisions, they rode westward out of Crookport, just after the sun had passed its zenith. They followed a road that turned gradually northward, skirting the edge of the great forest. It was a no-man's land that grew wilder and more lonely as they went. The map shows a likely place to spend the night, Gellor told his companions. There's a little village that lies a hard day's ride from the town, but if we press our steeds, they'll carry us there before much of the dark has been spent. Late in the afternoon they reached the place where the road split into three tracks. One veered toward the lake some 10 miles to the east. The central lane continued northward, and the leftmost trail ran westward angled toward the north. Gellor took the latter way, and urged his horse to a faster pace, for there was but an hour or two of light remaining, and a long distance yet to go before the village was reached. We are hunters, said the bard as he patted the heavy boar spear strapped beside him. The hour was but 2 from midnight, and they were near the village at last. No further caution was needed, and the three proceeded into the community, found a tavern that offered accommodations, and there spent a safe and restful night. The residents were curious to see the strangers, for not many such folk passed their way, at least not many of honest sort, or a group so few in number. They were unmolested, of course, for the three adventurers were obviously tough and capable. Local folk gave them a white berth, said Little, and when the strangers needed anything they bargained sharply, beginning with exorbitant prices, and grudgingly lowering them to merely outrageous demands. Gord pretended to be in need of a new spear, while Gellor and Shirt casually inquired about the most likely areas to find the great boars for which the area was famous. The village was in fact called Tusham, in recognition of the number of trophies of long, pointed teeth that decorated its tower and other establishment. Shirt, having hunted the ferocious pig of his own hills, was eager to discuss the habitats and tricks of the local beasts. There was enough of the same stamp among the rustics of the village, so barbarian and yokels were soon telling tall tales and looking wise. Gellor got his additional information, while Gord and Shirt ended up buying local boar spears at only slightly inflated prices. A pair of young lads wanted to guide the three adventurers, for there was a famous old boar in the neighborhood. They said it was a devil in pig's hide, actually, but that three skilled hunters such as these strangers could certainly bring it to bay and slay it. Gellor shooed them off, and the trio was soon out of Tusham and eating into the dim Vesve. They followed a narrow path that wended its way westward into the heart of the spreading forest. After an hour or so this path diverged, one fork tending toward the south a bit, the other seeming to curve northward. That was the direction desired, and they took the upper trail after a moment of pondering. There were occasional side paths, for here and there some woodcutter or hunter had his home. As Gellor had been told, they came to a hermit's cave in a low cliff that bordered a small woodland stream. The recluse was not to be seen, and after drinking and filling their waterskins, they rode on, chewing tough sausages and bits of dried fruit as they went. The path faded into nothingness thereafter, but there were numerous game trails that mindered and crisscrossed it. The woodland had been light, with patches of scrub and dense undergrowth, where forestation or brush fire had been at work upon its verge. Now the bolts were massive, rising to leafy crowns high above, and their limbs intertwined to make the forest floor dim and free of growth above starrup ached. The trails led to an occasional meadow or small clearing at first, but then the little tracks became fewer, and the places where sunlight reached and grass grew scarce. Although the forest was not hard to pass through, it was difficult to keep to a single direction. The sun was hidden, and the trails meandered confusingly between the thick trunks of the forest giants. Ip and Rowan woods dwarfing oaks that were hundreds of years old. Shirt was happy here, and both Geller and Gord had sufficient skill at woodcraft to be able to remain on a northerly route. At nightfall, the bard told them they were now in the territory frequented by the herds of wild pigs. They made certain that they were armed with their spears as they made camp and gathered fuel for the fire. Shirt slipped away to see if he could find any game for supper in the half hour of purple twilight that remained. He returned with an enormous squirrel, was caught was sooty hue. His chagrin at having found nothing bigger was changed to unease when the bard told him that such giants as the squirrel he had brought down were a sure sign of evil. They find it tasty anyway, roasted on a spit over the charry embers of their small fire. You say that such limbed lopers as that are found only in forests of eldritch sort? Asked the shirt again. Why are you surprised at that? The bard countered. You know that the Camion's servants use the art of the Vespa as a highway, and we are making for that evil core. It is encouraging to find the creatures of that ilk so soon. The trails of use must be nearer than I thought. Gord, not at all disturbed about the nature of the rodent, was thinking of the great swine that made their home in the area. And the wild boars? What about the tale of the one who is diabolical? He asked. Devils, devils and demons don't mix, as they say, Geller said with a small shrug. Still, perhaps the beast could be some form of demon, possessed, or in swine form, or even a were form of that sort. Let us hope that we can avoid confrontation with a boar of any kind. If not, then we must lay quick and sure. There are more important things we must accomplish than sticking pigs, mundane or supernatural. Let it be a plain old tusker, exclaimed Shirt enthusiastically. Second key or no, a big tusker roasted over an open fire is a dish I haven't tasted in far too long. Geller had been only half listening as the giant hillman spoke of such feasting. Without commenting, Geller quietly opened the leather bag with its little harp nestled upon the velvet that lined it. He sat back, ran his fingers experimentally across the silver strings, and made rippling melodies play around the firelit little clearing. Both young men watched and listened in fascination. Geller left off the runes and reels, playing instead a melody and singing a ballad that bespoke the camaraderie and gladness of a forest camp at the coming of night. The song lasted for minutes. Before it concluded, two forms emerged from the shadowy dark just beyond the edge of the campfire's light and joined the listeners. End of chapter 20 with a climax. Okay, last chapter for today. The next one, I mean, and then we end for today. And don't know when the next time is, but anyway, chapter 21. While Gord and his companions soaked the evil dwarf Obmi deep in the west forest, events elsewhere began to lead toward the resolution of the matter. Somewhere in the mountains to the west, a great citadel stood, carved from the basalt and obsidian of the peaks themselves. The fortress was cloaked magically, so that only a few knew where it stood, and fewer those dared to go near it. Within the sprawling complex were many sorts of folk, including the dwarven miners who dug the rich veins of platinum from the depths of the massifs, and the gnomish smiths who beat it into coins of finely wrought jewelry. Others, men and elves, carried the product of the mining and grafting further west into the Paraland and Ket, southward to Eichfolk and Beluna, and east into the sprawling kingdom of Furiondi. The citadel, the citadel was the demesne of Mordenkainen, and the various folk were all who owned him as their liege. The affairs of others seldom interested the Archmage, but of late he had been troubled by news from his agents. These included spies who roamed the domain of Yuz and actually entered the dreaded city of Doracha, or rode the plains of the Yerarchs and rank in the sins of Moloch. All said that evil bestirred itself. There were rumors of a concerted effort, even strange flashes of power in the cosmos. Mordenkainen took heed of all of this. Emissaries of magical and the ordinary type as well went forth to alert heads of state and other cryptic groups and powerful individuals to what the Archmage had learned. With them went a pledge of assistance and the promise to resist the growing coalition of malign forces. The knowledge sent hinted most abstrusely at the existence of the tripartite artifact and its first key. Those who were great in knowledge of arcane and recondite subjects knew then that the world stood in great peril. Back came more bits and pieces of information and assurance of cooperation. The elven folk of Eichfolk and their nominal subjects within the aegis of Vessus Forest made alliance with Mordenkainen and the force called the Obsidian Citadel. Seldom had they quarreled anyway, and the Archmage's vassals included many tribes of wild Gygax and wood elves. Agents came and went from secret places, bearing more secret communications. It happened that one of these agents managed to bring Yuz's first intelligence regarding the artifact of all evil, and alert the Cambion as to the likely whereabouts of the second key. Thus Obmi, the words of Yuz's secret six, managed to find the item where it was hidden in the lost temple. The item, not the item, the item, sorry. The host, raised by the Scarlet Brotherhood, meanwhile, had floundered through the Sis forest and upward to the Wildwood. Confused and slow, they had been harassed by the woodsmen and the elves in the process of their march. Furious at their inability to locate something already far beyond their reach, the brothers gathered a still greater force. Goblins and hobgoblins and any other of the vicious humanoids who could be found were conscripted to fight beside the bandits, brigands, and scum who served as auxiliaries for the main body. This army was composed of the highly trained and rigidly disciplined regiments of the Brotherhood. Its advance guard was 1,000 strong, and behind that regiment were 4 others. Such size was actually why the force was ineffective. It was increased by the addition of thousands of men and humanoids. So large a horde could not fail but to attract attention. The army had to eat, and its scurvy auxiliaries had to slay and burn. The wall rolled northward slowly, and then turned away from the forest to stab into the pastoral countryside of Selene. The elvish monarchy was awaiting. They fell upon the horde almost immediately, and a great pitched battle raged for 2 days thereafter. There fell the Marshal of Selene, Lord Parzival. With him, many other noble elves and men were slain as well. As spellcaster fought spellcaster, the plying of bow and spear, sword and axe, took the worst toll. Of the cousins, nephew, and brothers of the Scarlet Sign there was a great slaughter. Afterward, the regiments had no heart, and fought fiercely but without direction, so they died. Brigand companies and allied humanoids simply melted away, fleeing this way or that. Those that went east, back to the Wildwood, were ambushed or hunted down and then exterminated. In this manner, an assassin sometimes known as Blanc was brought low by Deirdre, a lady knight of Arbai, while the great company of outlaws whom he had led was slain to a man by the banner of riders and footmen who served her. Some few managed to remain alive by fleeing north or south. Those who escaped to the south eventually returned to the Pomage to tell of the terrible battle. Those who went northward found another fate. at the northern edge of the Crown Hills, where the fringe of the great gnarly forest sent no more of its briars and oaks towards the setting sun, stand the ruins of a large building. Until the place is now generally shunned, for another battle was fought near it, and its builders slain or gone in defeat. The place is, of course, the temple of elemental evil, its ruin, rather, as any local serf or peasant farm boy from the neighborhood could tell you. Other than an occasional group of adventurous explorers seeking forgotten treasure, nobody goes to the temple. Bad, evil things haunt the place still. To this very place came a company of another sort. Goodly clerics, stout cavaliers, and soldiers too, and a magic user or two, or two as well, sorry. They came because a dire warning said that some being of great evil still lurked there, imprisoned in the temple, but about to be loosed. They traveled quickly and with grim purpose. They were greeted by a mass of fugitives. These evil men and humanoids were spoiling for revenge, and they lay in wait for the company. These outlaws had strong and fearsome leaders now, folk from the hidden places beneath the temple, and others too. They took to kill the clerics and knights and all the rest. The evil leaders left them, talked, and as most of their fellows had done earlier, these survivors did now. They were killed on the field. The battle, small and brief as it actually was, comparatively speaking, took its toll on the company. There was a delay for meditation and prayer, for healing and rest, to prepare for the entry into the temple of elemental evil. Time had been purchased at a price held cheap and meaningless by those within the place. A great personage, an ancient magus, a feared and mighty one of eld, had come among the few who still remained within the precincts of the ruin. She it was who set the ambush, broke the delay, and gained the time for her hands. The company came ready again to face any foe of evil nature. Into the temple they came, driving all before them. Downward they plunged, sending undead things back to the pits from which they came, destroying the lurking monsters who would otherwise prey upon mankind. Deep and deeper they went, seeking what they knew they must find. Even as they finally discovered the confining place and readied for the great confrontation, a pair of ghastly figures sprang upward, passing through stone and earth as if it were air. Too late had these arch-clerics and doughty fighters come. Igwilv, mother of evil, had come before them, and freed the demoness Zaktmoy. But as these minions of good lamented their failure, there were those not allied to evil who rejoiced at Igwilv's success. Mordenkainen, one who had secretly aided the plan to free the monstrous demoness, was among them. 13 stone chairs stand above the many lesser seats in the Hall of Dread in Moloch. 5 to either end are smaller and lower than the 3 in the center. 13 thrones for the 13 hierarchs, the dread and awful presences who rule the horned society. Only 3 of the chairs were empty. The 3 of the tallest thrones remained vacant, as the hierarchs took their places. 5 to the right, 5 to the left. Officials and military officers filed in to stand below the thrones. Down the aisle, left unusually broad by the press of lesser masters of the hoarded society, humanoid chieftains, bandit leaders, all wafted a terrible stench. As the full odor came, the ranks compacted tighter still, and the wide space was made wider by this movement. Behind the decaying stink came something from which eyes turned away in revulsion. Before the thrones and the 10 hierarchs came Anthraxus the Decayed, Diamond King of Hades. It is worthy of note that the 10 who sat upon the stone chairs did not avert their eyes as the monstrous figure glided toward them. "Greeting, Lord of Gloons," said the greatest of the remaining 10 hierarchs, acknowledging Anthraxus by the list of his titles as if in challenge. The Demon King made no signs that he had noticed the affront. "And to you all," the thing replied in a voice that seemed to issue from an empty chest, and the throat choked with maggots. "I am come at the behest of Nerul to assist you in your war." None of the 10 flinched at the mention of the war, even though they had only today received news that masses of used troops were marching through the northern regions of the realm. Again the greatest spoke. "We serve evil." We serve evil, and acknowledge their rule as overlord. We likewise serve the same ends as thee. But why is it that our one master does not himself come? The great Oino demon sneered and puffed out a cloud of fetid breath in answer. Play not fools, you remaining yerks. Isn't the loss of 3 of your number enough to teach you your place? The spokesman seemed totally unaffected by the implication of the question. You mean as his servants? He replied in an icy level tone. What else? Anthraxus shoot back in a voice that would sicken any normal listener. Of course, Lord of Glooms, just as you come to us, and the spokesman allowed his voice to trail off but raised a finger and spoke again. The 3 who represented Tartarus, Hades, and Gehenna are gone. We have not yet had the trails which will elevate 3 of our own number to these exalted positions, and bring 3 lessers to sit with the 10. Until we are 3 and 10 once again, our power is insufficient against the rebel who opposes the unification. You waste my time, Anthraxus said in a voice that coged and choked. No, master of demonkind, you are wasting your time, and ours too. We 10 erred, but not as did the former 3. It is not my place to question the removal of the offenders by the master of us all, but I do state now that unless the society is given aid, we and the unification are in jeopardy. Do not place undue importance on yourselves or your petty realm. The Oino demon whistled angrily. Then why did Lord Nerul send you to us? The speaker asked mildly. Anthraxus shook his rotting, round-like head in frustration. I am come to make certain you make no further errors, and to aid you against the might of that fungi-fornicating, toad-spowed whelp of a miserable little demon prince selling yes. The spokesman nodded, with neither pride nor fear in expression, or the voiced statement that followed. Now we understand fully, Lord of Hades, but there is that which must be spoken. What if the Cambion gains the second key? Then you will take it from him. The ghastly diseased voice of the Oino demon rasped, and I shall be there to see you do not fail again. Bits of decaying matter fell from Anthraxus, dropping here and there as he went. The Oino demon had been standing before the town of the Yerks for an extended period, and a small circle of the putrescent matter had accumulated around his filthy red cloak. As he was about to turn and leave, he saw the faces of the enthroned 10 turn pale, eyes start and shake. He followed their staring gaze down to the hem of the garment, where the leather of rotting stuff oozed and stunk. The stuff had become a fiery ring of fungi, tiny zygomes sprouting from the rot. At that moment Anthraxus felt fear crawl through his plugged body. Obmi and the crested elf Kik moved carefully once they were well beyond Littleberg. They rode sharply west to gain the no man's land between Veluna and Furiondi. Once they were in, they veered northward again, toward the great forest above. It was dangerous going for them, with patrols to avoid, groups of bandits to dodge or evade, and occasional brushes with feral animals or night-stalking monsters to deal with. Despite all of that, Obmi was satisfied with their progress. Kik had told the dwarf about the curious elf, the last probable pursuer they had, but not followed. None knew where he went, and he had the prize. Scarcely a se'night after leaving Littleberg, they came to the seedy little village of Stump. Obmi sought an agent of use there, but none were to be found. In fact, because of Kik, they were virtually treated as untouchables by the folk of the village. The residents of Stump had a reputation for aiding and abetting outlaws and reavers if they were paid. There were places to dispose of stolen goods in the village, brothels, and a gambling hall for disposing of excess coin. Elfen knights had been to the village just days before. Their men-at-arms, elves-at-arms to be correct, had searched the whole community and discovered the property that could be identified as stolen goods. Villagers were hanged on the spot, and a half-dozen were carried off for questioning. That Obmi talked explained why there was no help for them there. They stayed and debauched themselves a day or two anyway. For the dwarf thought a second visit from the knights improbable. As he had hoped, a scar-faced wolf orc and several men appeared in Stump asking for a dwarf. The villagers, thinking that these ruffians had come to kill both Obmi and Kik, cheerfully directed the group to where the dwarf and elves will cheap wine and sport. Obmi killed the proprietor of the establishment as he looked expectantly for an attack upon the pair of customers. He would have murdered himself if he dared. Logan Kick dragged the best looking of the women from the place. In a few minutes they were riding to the edge of the towering forest, and the low folk of the village quickly forgot that they had ever been a stump. The going was slow but steady. The half-orc was the leader, and the three men who served him were skilled woodsmen. After seeing Dwarf's hammer in action, none questioned his assumption of leadership. Kik was even more feared than Obmi because of the elf's absolute unpredictability. There were stations, lone huts, tiny torps, or hidden places where they found a safe night's rest, food, even fresh mounts. After a few days, more men and a handful of arboreal ores joined them as a reinforcement. The arboreal ores were new to both Obmi and Kik. The creatures seemed to show a strong strain of ape, and this fascinated both dwarf and elf. Eventually, Kik gave the woman to the ape ores, and they soon killed her. By then, the band was halfway through the vast, and you sent Obmi word that a fitting escort was coming to bring them safely to Duraha. At this same time, almost at the same moment, Mordenkainen himself took the field. With him were his trusted henchmen of old, as well as the grey elf fighter and magic user Melf, and several companies of deadly elves and hard foresters. The archmage had waited quietly as the second key came ever nearer to him. Now he would strike quickly, take the thing, and return with it to the citadel. Then let evil rave and threaten, let the forces of good demand. He would hold the key, and with it would withstand such threats easily. As long as the factions of the Malayan fought and quarreled, as long as men established nations, estates, and fought among themselves, this long will there be need for those who saw the world as a slowly turning wheel. Neutral, even though generally despising true evilness, the obsidian citadel will remain strong and assist the balance. The possession of the second key guaranteed that. Why then, Mordenkainen wondered as he set about his foray, did the hierophants of this cabal not support him? Jealousy, he supposed, that must be the reason. End of chapter 21, and end of today's life. It's pretty late, but it's okay. We read the 3 chapters, finally, and we are at 66% of the book. Next time, I hope to read another 3 chapters and going up to chapter 24, but I don't know when next time is. So, hope to see you soon in the future, and if you like what you read, what I read, and you listen, please subscribe to my channel. Anyway, have a good night, have a good day, have a good everything, and I don't really know.